Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome back. So I do not see anything on the agenda right now. Some items may come up during the meeting, but we can start with the status. And since I have updated the status items first, I will also go first. And I have some very interesting news. Um, so the CTAM repo from Microsoft to the GPU compliance, I have manually published a PyPy package out of that because because it's generally useful for people to be able to run, and also because we used it in a hackathon last week, like inside Meta. And on that topic, the hackathon was quite successful. I did actually mention it last week as well as it was happening. But we have at least 3 different projects that are now using the output spec quite comprehensively. I don't think I can name the project specifically, but there's a lot of acceptance and getting a lot of traction. Some of those are meant to be open sourced. Maybe Giovanni or Karen, do you want to share anything on the hackathon topic for the group here?
I would say there was a lot of positivity towards using the specification. And even where there was one project where they haven't started the week by considering it, that we were able to get them engaged in it. So being able to get people engaged internally is a good sign for adopting a spec that's community-wide. Without going into specifics, I suppose. But yeah.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Yeah, as I said, some of those are on the track of open sourcing, so we will be able to talk about them at that point. But it's very nice. Like it got a lot of traction. Go ahead, Dan.
It's awesome news, man. First of all, thank you for helping to drive that. I think that's very, very encouraging. I've got some similar, good news for maybe a bad reason. We had a bit of a meltdown earlier this week where one of our directors on the storage side had sort of freaked out at us because a lot of our tests were not portable and we weren't able to give them to other people, which is obviously one of the things that we're trying to address here for validating some various devices. And the push now is to basically get all of our tests for this particular horizontal rolled into this diagnostic format. So I'm going to be meeting with an internal team today, which we call EngProd, which is our engineering productivity group. And we're going to see what we can do to actually move our standard frameworks in this way too. So that'll mean a lot more internal adoption. I don't know how many of the tests will really be useful to other folks that I need to see, but once again, I think it's that we're striking a chord here for a common problem. I did have one quick question for you, Adrian, that came up last week, and I didn't know the answer to it. When you are publishing the packages under PyPy right now, are you doing that under an OCP identity, your own identity, or a meta identity? Like, who's signing the package?
Those are different questions. Who's signing the package and who's publishing the package? So the packages are now published from the CI from GitHub. That's
Okay.
on the technical aspect. The account publishing the packages, like the identity on PyPy, is one that I made with the OCP account, with the OCP email. So it's technically OCP branded.
Okay, perfect.
Is there a concern there? Like, what is the context of the question?
No, just we have a few things that I think we're probably going to need that too, because it just simplifies from build processes. And I just want to be consistent, right? Like if you're publishing under an OCP ID, then we should do the same thing.
I know PyPy has like a joint account thing, something. So I can either add you to the account that I made, or I mean, if you want to make a different one and publish under that account as maintainer, I guess that also works.
Yeah, I don't have a strong preference, just as long as they're not like from, Meta and Google and Adrian and Alligator Guy on GitHub or whoever it is, right? Just we're all doing it the same way.
Okay, so in that case, I would rather keep them all in one place. And I'll look at the PyPy credentials. Like if you can give me like a PyPy account, and I'll see if I can add it to maintainers for these.
Okay, yeah, I don't even know if we have one at the moment, so we may need to create it.
All right, I'll coordinate with you on email or something. I have a question for you as well. When you say the diags are not portable, is that ABI portability or because you said we're moving to them outputting the spec, like the standard spec, which is a different level of portability?
It's really two things. One, they use an internal CI framework where the framework is kind of built into the diag, and then the other challenge is the output that they have just isn't really good for like sort of large scale qualification. There's a lot of like manual log parsing and things. It's kind of unstructured output, right? Which is making debug and everything more difficult than it needs to be.
I see. So it's kind of both in a way. Okay, I got it. Okay, next up for status updates. Igor, you have a line with experimented with fault injection. You wanna talk about that?
Yeah, right. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I got carried away with injecting memory fault, so I didn't have much progress on the mem tester itself. But let me briefly describe my results. So what I did, I ran QEMU inside the Docker container so that all the dependencies are satisfied automatically, and I ran a minimal image of Ubuntu on top of QEMU, and then I connected to this QEMU instance from a GDB using remote connection. And I was able to intercept memory accesses that Ubuntu does. For example, there is an address in x86 that is a boot address. And basically when Ubuntu booted, I could halt the execution of the virtual machine and basically intercept this read access. I couldn't alter the memory so that I could fail the boot, so something is wrong probably, but at least this can be intercepted. So my final goal was to run memtester on that Ubuntu and finally fail certain memory address when it's accessed by memtester. But I think it's probably not that important right now. I probably need to focus on finishing the documentation and create a pull request, and then I will return back to doing the memory injection thing. In general, it may be useful to us for simulating some other faults, maybe some CPU faults, or I don't know, something else related to hardware. So if you are interested in that line of work, let me know.
Thanks, Igor. I have a question. So this whole thing with fault injection, this is just so you can test the diag in isolation, right?
Right. This is a little bit of an overkill, but I thought maybe we could extend it further for more complicated cases.
No, this is definitely interesting. Like if you could export that as some code on GitHub. I mean, based on what you just said, it's like a QEMU config.
Right. It's in a Docker container, so there is a script basically that could reproduce this. Yeah, so once I finish it to the point where I can actually inject a fault, yeah, I should be able to share it, and people should be able to reproduce it.
Yeah, very interesting though. I actually had an action item from last week, which I didn't get to ask a person on our side about memory fault injection. We have a question for you, Karen. Do you know if Anil's project with fault injection can do memory fault injection?
The broad answer is probably yes, but I know that he was looking to add other types of memory fault injections as well to it of different patterns. So it's a longer answer that I don't know the details for. But
Okay,
yeah, go on.
but he is the right person to put in contact with Igor on this topic, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll deal with that later. Sorry about the delay, Igor.
No worries, no worries.
Okay. Next up with the status update, Arun, you have something on the slides.
I just said that I got the slides from Dan.
Okay, that is a very short update, but you have a line in the document, so I needed to call upon you for the recorded meeting. Okay, so these are the slides that will fit in the HP presentation, and they're like about the OCP test validation project, right?
Yes, this is the plan to give us a bit of publicity in all the accepted talks.
Okay. I see your hand up, Dan. I have a question for Young on this same topic. I don't remember if we discussed the same thing with the Microsoft presentations, like if you have space for 1 or 2 slides to reference this project.
Yes, I was just going to discuss this with the team here this morning. So last 2 weeks, so my team was preparing the executive talk by Microsoft. We just got confirmation, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, and we do want to mention our collaboration here. So do we want like another meeting with I don't know, maybe you and Dan to discuss what we should put there, or you are okay with whatever we put there? How do you want to work this out?
Go ahead, Dan, if you have an answer to this.
I do. I mean, we're going to be okay with whatever you put there, but I would be curious in seeing it. But if you want input, we're happy to provide it as well, is what I would say. My hand was actually stale. It was for a topic on that Igor was discussing, so we can come back to that later. Let's finish this one.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. So I will send you the slide before next week on the Microsoft executive talk, and yeah, just let me know if you have feedback.
Okay, now if it's an executive talk, it's my recollection that those are not reviewed beforehand. Is that correct?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not giving the talk. My director is.
Okay.
I can,
yeah,
I
no,
can
definitely
ask,
send
yeah.
over the slides. We're happy to put in 1 slide of content there.
Do you have any content that you might want to suggest where that do you want to put the same thing on the
So because I'm trying to, instead of send like 4 or 5 different messages, I'd like to just pound 1 message into the ground. And I think it's pretty much about the portability of the test. And I think that fits really well with the work that you guys are doing on the benchmarking and the virtual client.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess Young will coordinate with Dan on email or some sort to get that in. My opinion, though, Dan, thanks, Young. My opinion, though, Dan, is it probably shouldn't be the same exact slide, like make it fit with the presentation, right?
Yep.
On that same topic, actually, you were talking about some workloads a while ago to be put into VC. Is that still going on?
It's actually the schema, the logger. I will complete this week. Sorry, the last couple weeks really busy for me. But yeah, I will complete it, and we will show that in the OCP Summit booth. It's not any particular workload, it's just a way so for us to produce that schema in any workload we run.
Oh, so this is still on the topic of outputting JSON compliant with the spec, right?
Yes, yeah. But do you have any workloads that you like this initiative will benefit from? Like once if we onboard something?
This question for me or Dan?
The entire team, like any workloads that you would like us to automate, like in the near term.
So what I can tell you from our side, from Meta, is some people were looking at the VC virtual client and looking at the workloads last week, like during the hackathon.
Great.
If that continues, we may have additional workloads there, but I'm not making any promises right now. Just a heads up.
Okay.
There are so we are looking at workloads in general, not just specifically Microsoft, to see what are the requirements we have, in particular for a GPU, and from a system stress rather than just individual components.
Okay. Yeah, just let me know if you have feedback.
Will do. I think to add to Karen's comment, the two that we went through and that we were probably most interested in were the I can't remember the exact name, but they're the zip and compression benchmarks. It's got like gzip and WinRAR and all that good stuff in there, because they use some of the extended wide register instructions, which we want to stress, and then MLPerf is probably the other one.
Yeah, and on Windows we just onboarded spec UPerf.
MLPerf.
Yeah, I know. And
an NVIDIA specific library, I believe.
Yeah, Linux. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now we only support inferencing on MLPerf and only on NVIDIA, and we are adding MLPerf training. It's just because the training data is huge and it takes very long time to pre-process, but we designed a mechanism to bypass that. So we are pre-processing the data, but still able to stress the GPU with the training process. So now you don't need to wait a couple of days for the MLPerf training to start. So that's in the process.
Okay, thanks, Young. Your question for Igor, Dan.
Igor, regarding the failure injection that you were working on around memory, and I was just curious why you weren't going down the EINJ route, but I suspect it's because you're wanting to raise a miscompare. Is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not aware of the first method that you mentioned. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there's sort of two main methods that we use right now for memory error injection. One is EINJ, which I can send you some documentation for. You can talk to Yi and Jixon on our team, who are the experts in it. And then also there's some proprietary stuff from Intel and AMD, like C scripts and things like that we can discuss as well. But I don't know that they'll get you to where you can get a miscompare. They'll get you an MCE, but I don't think that you can actually modify the register content without JTAG right now.
So yeah, I wasn't aware of these methods, so maybe I should read the docs. But I wasn't also targeting just miscompare. I wanted to simulate any memory fault.
Okay. Yeah, let me get some time with you. I'll find 15 minutes later today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay then. Satish or Juan, do either of you have any updates on the respective LMT tools?
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, first thing I think yeah, Karen mentioned, like, where is this notes where we can populate our minutes and topic?
It's on the chat. It's the first thing on the chat today.
Okay. And let me take okay, sounds good. So next thing is, Dan, thank you so much for your email. I went through it and it looks perfect. But yeah, I think there are a couple of things which I would like to sorry for the context. Is it okay to discuss it in detail here, or can we discuss in detail tomorrow when we meet? Or you're on mute, Dan.
I was actually going to defer this to Adrian as our chairperson. We might get through all the general purpose topics and then get down into the weeds on like bits and bytes, right?
Sounds good. Yeah. So in that case, from TLDR status is like, yeah, I unfortunately couldn't take part in the hackathon last week because of other things going on. So, but the plan is to get to it sooner. Probably after a meeting tomorrow, the next week would be a right time to get into the implementation of the OCP formatting for the LMT on PCI side. Yeah, that's the TLDR status on this one.
All right, thanks, Satish. Well,
I don't have any updates. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was not around last week, so I have to postpone our whiteboard discussion until tomorrow.
no worries. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so I guess that's it for updates. I don't know if anyone else wants to raise any topic for updates. I guess not. Okay, so we don't have anything on the agenda, as I was saying, so anything goes right now for like another half hour if it's interesting to most people here. So who wants to start?
I had a just, I don't know if it's an update, but an engagement thing. So we I had to talk to some folks who are needing to do OSV for DIMMs, so on-site verification of failures that we find at the factory. And so we needed a tool, and we were engaging with the DIMM vendors for them to develop a tool that we can run at our factory. So I pointed them directly at the OCP format with the idea that if DIMM vendors need to do this sort of tooling, that it's likely to be something that they can also provide to their other vendor, the other customers who are buying DIMMs. So I just began the discussions and pointed our quality and the relevant teams at that. But just an FYI, if anybody from different organizations and different companies is dealing with DIMM vendors, having a common message of, hey, if we want on-site verification tools in this OCP diag format, maybe a good push to that we start kind of having the King Sons of the world.
Yeah, great call out,
That's-
Marcos. Very, very relevant here. So I may ping you and loop somebody else who has been taking on a very similar engagement. So yeah, very, very good idea, actually. Good potential.
I would also say that with what Dan was speaking about earlier, there might be an opportunity for disk vendors as well that we could look at. That's the thing.
So did we mention the SSD diags, Karen, in this group?
So we're
They are going to be open sourced, so.
They are, but I think the standardization, like what Marcos mentioned, that if we can look at that from a disk point of view, maybe the work that Google are doing, we're doing, there might be an opportunity there too.
All right, so technically these are disjoint, but they're kind of on the same topic of vendor related or running code in vendor space and or working with vendors for them to be aware of this project. That's kind of the commonality between these two.
I think it's a good topic in itself, how we work with vendors, and we're getting to that point of maybe we've enough surface area between the companies here to be able to look at it.
Okay, so Vincent, you're taking an action on that memory thing from Marcos, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna facilitate mostly the connection from our internal DIMM expert who has been doing a similar engagement on OSV. So I'll put him in touch. Should I put him in touch with you, Marcos?
I can, yeah. You can go through me. I'll try. Yes. I will figure out who's engaging, actually driving this, because we had our quality folk, and then our somebody on my team, and
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, Adrian, I'll do the follow-up on that one, but it's probably something that's gonna move at a different pace. I don't expect this to be like in days, it will be weeks.
Yeah, it just seemed like a regular, like a more generic thing of, as we're engaging with any one of our suppliers and requesting them to create tools for us, keeping this OCP diag in mind as a selling point for the vendor to do something once that they can then turn around and sell to all of us, right? Everybody wins here, so it's the easy win.
Yep.
It is exactly what we're supposed to be doing in this group. I'm interested on the tracking aspect, Vincent. That's why I asked you. So you have an assigned action in the meeting notes now. Okay. If we're done with the status, I think you wanted some time, Satish, to talk about the LMT.
Yeah, I think so. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Let me share my screen for some context. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so on the right side is the OCP discussion, and the left side is Dan's email. So just let's recap. So the discussion is about here, like how do I format the given result into OCP spec output formatting. So I think the Dan's proposal, if I understand correctly, just to make sure, is every BDF is going to be a hardware info at the top level. So here, for example, 1A is a BDF, and that's going to be hardware info. And then every hardware info will be tied to a bus level measurement, in this case, the PCI speed, width, and all the LMT capabilities. And so every capability and every information about the hardware is going to be a bus level measurement. And then the lane level measurements will be another set of measurement, but it's going to be a subcomponent instead of, so that's where I wanted to know, like, so it's not a series here, because measurement series is more of a measurement, like a series of measurements on a single property. But in this case, lane 0, lane 1 are not single properties, or individual ones, so we need to have subcomponent. I understand that, but only question I have is, like, on the right side, if you see, we have two more dimensions. Like, we are having the same set of information for every step we are sampling, like step 0 to 15 based on device. And we are doing the same device, same lane for the same step. We'll be doing at multiple receivers. The same device might be margining on the TX side of the retimer side, or on the RX side was the root port. So it could be multiple receivers. So we need to figure out how do we incorporate those two dimensions into this format.
Yeah, it's actually the point that I was thinking about. And one thing that we could do here is where I broke it down to the lane, you could further break the lane down to the TXRX endpoints if you wanted to, right? Now, TXRX is kind of arbitrary depending on which side you feel you're on, right? But like that would be one thing to do. I wanted to maybe elucidate a little bit on this as well. There's kind of two parts of this. There's the breakdown of the test step artifacts and, you know, all the other stuff that you had in your example. And honestly, I think that's perfect. That's the way that I would have done it as well. I was just adding in the parts that were missing, which was the hardware associations to the part. So I think you take your proposal and this one together, and then I think you get the whole thing. The one part that I didn't quite follow, Satish, and maybe you just answered it, was when I was going through your example, and I imagine you probably truncated it to keep it short.
Yes.
I would have expected to see what you just said, the same measurement over and over for like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, as you move across the eye. I didn't see that though, because that would be a measurement series, right? But I didn't see that in your output, but maybe I misunderstood what it meant.
I see. Yeah, I think I did do truncate because of, like, it's too much information, and just to give brief idea. But yeah, I can agree that it would be better to visualize things and see where we can group them together into series and things like that.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't change anything at all regarding the hardware breakdown. It just really changes, do you use the measurement or do you use the measurement series? And the only real difference is, one's obviously a list and the validators are slightly different that you can use. I didn't put in the validators because they're kind of obvious, right? Yours are pretty easy. They're like less than a number or greater than a number.
That's correct. So currently, I think we are just looking at the error count, and then so I just put equal to, not equal to zeros. You see. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, let me dig into it deeper probably when we meet tomorrow. We can do some more whiteboarding session. Then I forward the invite to Francisco as well. So if he's available, he can dial in.
It sounds good. Yeah, sorry about the very, very late getting that over to you. It's just been a crazy week getting over our perf cycle. The other thing I was going to add to here was I went ahead and made the hardware devices logical IDs because it's just the easiest thing to do with the way your diag works, right? In a more perfect world, they would be tied to physical devices. Like we would say the PCIe devices on a motherboard or the PCIe devices on a mezzanine card or something like that. But honestly, it's going to dramatically change your diag. And that's probably a more difficult problem than the actual lane margining itself. So I figure we punt on that for now and just get the value out of it.
I see. Makes sense. Sounds good. Yeah, then thank you so much for initiating this thread so that we can start building on top of that.
So
yeah, and well, I looked at your output as well, and I think honestly, probably the same thing would probably apply if we wanted to break it down this way. The format is very different, but the content is pretty similar.
Hey, just so I catch up here, we're not looking for a change in the spec. We're looking on we're going on how to implement using the existing spec.
Right.
Okay. Good.
That's correct.
Can I ask a question? I was trying to understand your email. You have seems like you have two levels of scope or property defined. What are those corresponds to what? Like, what's the general use case of these? One is hardware, and the other one is a lower level property. So okay. So what is a hardware info ID? What's the scope of that in general?
Yeah, so at a high level, it's typically a fruable device. So it's something physical that you can touch, right? Like in this case, it might be a motherboard, it might be a card, it might be something like that. Whereas the subcomponent is like a subsystem of that device. And that might be a chip or a lane or a bus or a connector or whatever it is, right?
I'll jump in for a second here because this came up like last week from a couple of teams. I think I mentioned it last week as well, but since we're on this topic, like the specific question there was, how do we map a cluster? Like is the cluster the DUT? Are the hardware components like the servers? So saying that it's a fruable component, that was the initial definition that we had, and it's probably in the spec as well, in relation to the subcomponents. But more generally speaking, we should document like these examples that we discover along the way. So even with this discussion right now, which is, what is the hardware info ID? What is a component? Maybe someone would take notes on this and document it so we can add it. I don't know if we should add it to the spec, but maybe like a side document that complements the spec.
I think it sort of and obviously open to other opinions here. The language in the spec, because it's a spec, tends to be very I don't know, dry and technical and precise. Whereas I think sort of like analogies or examples might go further, which your second case probably would fit. Like we have the exact same problem that you guys are running into. Like if we're testing like hypothetically an ML system where we may test each machine individually and then we connect them all together and then we're testing a set of machines, right? In which case the DUT has changed, right? Now the device under test is maybe the rack, right? In which case, like what is the hardware info can change, right? Because what we're actually doing changes.
Well, that's the thing. The spec is intentionally general.
Yeah.
So I don't say vague, but it is intentionally general so that it can map to each of these concepts. But that generality also induces a lot of confusion in people. So that's why I'm saying we should document these examples in, maybe an examples thing along with the spec, so that people who implement DIAGs from scratch can reference those, right? So then if you have this internally, like if you're considering all of that, maybe you can as well internally like consolidate all of that into some documentation.
Yeah, well, let me provide the examples. I think they'll go further than the spec. And then maybe one, I don't know, observation. I was trying to use the new Markdown version of the spec because some changes had been made to it, right? It is significantly more difficult than the PDF. I think it is what it is, right? But I don't know how to fix it. It's just an observation.
We can easily render it to a PDF if you want that format.
Yeah, I think the thing that is the most valuable to me, and it may be different than a newcomer because I'm somewhat familiar with it, is the actual diagram of the spec probably helps me more than a lot of the written content, just because
Correct.
it's verbose. I think it's 100 pages now, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of pages, but
Yeah.
we are indeed missing the diagram, and I think this was some action item a while ago. Obviously, this wasn't completed. If you still have the diagram though, because I know you had that initially in some documents.
I
Maybe
do.
we can export that in somewhere.
Yeah, the problem that we ran into was we didn't have a place to put the binary, the PNG, right? And now I think we've decided like we'll just put it in GitHub, right?
That can go in the core repo just fine. In LFS.
Sounds good.
All right, let me know if you need any help with that. The diagram is certainly helpful for people. There was a hand up from Marcos. We took that down.
Yeah, I was going to say the discussion about the subcomponent, but I think we've moved on.
Okay, go ahead, Noah.
The follow-up question. So for the subcomponent, is it like can I have a subcomponent under subcomponent? It's like a hierarchical. Is it like?
We don't expose a hierarchy, but you can induce a hierarchy in your naming scheme. We discussed that a lot, and we decided we did not want the hierarchy because it just adds so much complexity to parsing. And then the other thing that runs into is most of this data runs into a database. And then as soon as you institute a hierarchy, then a lot of the queries are no longer possible without some type of Flume job or something because you can't really do hierarchical SQL queries.
Let me qualify that a bit. That also came up like last week. We don't have a hierarchy in the spec format, like in the JSON and messaging, but you may think of the same hierarchy as being flattened in the component identification in the components and subcomponents. So it's like you have to make your own thing with like / whatever.
Yeah. And then maybe just to add one more thing, if you're really diehard about the hierarchy, you really want it, then you have the metadata. You can introduce any hierarchy you really want there.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Thanks.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood something. So here is a subcomponent which a hardware info ID pointing to 1. That means this is going back to this hardware info ID, right?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you notice, like, we did a subcomponent. Like the most obvious thing to do is not to do a subcomponent, but to add like a parent and child to the hardware info, and then you could kind of create the hierarchy that way. We purposely chose not to do that after what felt like months of discussion.
So technically there is a hierarchy in the spec, but we probably need to explain better how this maps to reality, because the hierarchy in the spec is like the DUT has hardware components and they have subcomponents. That's like the hierarchy. But this is actually a flattening of physical hierarchies. So multiple things can go into the DUT, multiple things can go into components, and like you can flatten them with in the component location, for example. And subcomponents don't really match that. Like subcomponents are one thing generally. So maybe the mapping isn't that obvious.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one more thing for Wallace benefit. The definition of subcomponent, even though it is there's an enum saying what they are, it's actually very, very loose. I would say the most common use of subcomponent is probably the chip on a device that we're interested in, because we can repair that. But I've seen subcomponent used for like functional blocks in a chip. I've seen it, like, it's all over the place, right? Once you get below the level of what somebody can fix with a soldering iron, then it almost doesn't really have any real impact on the real world. It's up to you as the data person, right?
Okay, so in that sense, okay, if a subcomponent is a flattened hierarchy, okay, in this case, how do we define a subcomponent? I'm thinking, okay, can we associate multiple measurement series under one subcomponent? Or, okay, we can have.
No. The measurement series are coupled with the components, not the subcomponents.
It's actually both.
It was flattened inside the measurements directly, the subcomponent, right?
Yeah, and then you
Okay.
just duplicate it. Yeah.
Okay, I misremember that. Sorry about that.
No worries. I had to. The only reason I remember is because I looked last night.
Because you no, but you proposed that initially. Like, so the component is referenced by the ID, but the subcomponent is copied inside the measurement.
Yeah.
So
it's
so once,
inconsistent, right?
but I think the important thing is that whenever for the diag author to figure out, understand where your diag will be being used, right? Because if I'm doing a chip, a chip test at the SLT station, I'm going to be caring about cores and binning, etc. Whereas at the L10 station, it's yes, CPU good bad. At the pod level, at the data center, I may be running it like, yes, like that machine has a bad CPU. Well, hopefully you're not using the same diag all the way through, but if you were, that like your hardware and your subcomponent would change in each one of these things. And so then as a diag author, I don't think what we're talking about makes that possible, right? To change what the hardware ID and the subcomponent is based on where you're running the same diag executable.
Yeah, it's not impossible. You could do it by passing in a parameter that says where you're using it, but I don't know of any example where it's been done so far.
So I think the general consensus was that the level at which you see the hardware depends on where you run the diagnostic in the first place. Like basically it's what you just said, Mark, was depending on the level you're interested in different pieces or different granularities of the hardware. I mean, that isn't to say that you cannot use a lower level diag as a spawned executable or something in a higher level diag. Like if you care about the rack, but you want some diag on a particular CPU from a host, you could technically spawn a lower level diag for that purpose. But arguably without parameterizing a single package, that the idea that Dan just said, it's difficult to have all of this into one single package to act at multiple levels. Like it's gonna make it too large, in my opinion.
Relevant when you're integrating with some other floor system or binning system or something like you mentioned, right? If it's for like a qualification or something like that, you generally have a smart human that can interpret it, and then it's less important.
Well, I don't know about, sometimes I do it, so it's not always a smart human.
Right. Sorry, I have a quick question about the hardware info ID. So the spec says it's a unique identifier is to reference hardware device. Meaning, is there a enforcement? Like, what happens if I give a non-unique, like if I use one for all hardware info, is there a restriction or enforcement anywhere in this? Is it going to, like, I'm trying to see, how do I know when I'm generating hardware info, I know like 1A is 1, 1B is 2, and things like that. But when I'm generating the subcomponents, how do I know that I need to map it to the right, how do I know I'm doing the right thing?
Your diag would have to know that these subcomponents belong to that particular hardware info.
Hmm.
So this is more of a question at the level of the API implementation.
Right.
So if you're asking specifically about the Python one,
Mhm.
then in the Python one you don't get access to these IDs. They are automatically generated, at least now, like with the existing code. But you do have strongly typed objects to be like the component. So the diag needs to take account of those objects in Python for components, and then you automatically know that this component is from this subcomponent is from this component object.
Yeah, if I remember properly too, I think the original like 1.0 version of the spec, which was Melton, actually did include the hierarchy, and we took it out because it was causing more trouble than it was worth.
Hmm. Okay. All right, that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. We're on the last minutes anyway, so 7 more minutes. I just remembered in the meantime, as I was looking at the sample outputs from Satish, I do have an update from Paul, who isn't able to be here today. So there is a PR that has started like a week or two ago with adding the outputs to the PCI crawler. I am unfortunately lagging that PR a bit because I'm overly strict with the review for Paul. I'm sure he's very happy about that. But it is like on the last stretch, so probably by next week, people could run PCI crawler and get the output.
Cool. Yeah, we're actually going to use it on a real product, so it's going to be real. We actually took something from the outside for, I think, what is the very first time.
Very nice.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess if there's nothing else for today in the last 5 minutes, going once. No. Okay, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week.
See some of you guys tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.